Hello everyone, this is Lindsey Baker with Action Hour podcast for Unchained TV. I have breaking news in the world of horse racing. Tracks are shutting down, scandals are piling up, and yet horses keep dying on America's tracks. 2025 is shaping up to be a turning point. Today I have Patrick Battuello and Nicole Arciello of Horse Racing Wrongs. They're joining us to pull back the curtain on what's really going on, why these closures matter, and where the fight for these magnificent creatures goes from here.
Patrick, could you just start off addressing to us what is the latest going on?
So yeah, there has been great progress nationally, especially in Northern California. Golden Gate Fields closed for good after 83 years of abusing and killing horses last June of 2024. The Northern California horse people tried desperately to keep things going up there, and they created what was called Golden State Racing in the fall at Pleasanton in Alameda County, and that failed miserably. So all their projections for revenue and handle missed the mark, and they shut down with the close of that meet in the fall. In January of this year, the California Authority of Racing Fairs, CARF it's called, which represents the county fair circuit, which had been running for decades in Northern California, did not apply for racing dates. And there were two fairs, Fresno and Ferndale, did independently apply, and they were rejected by the California Horse Racing Board. So as it stands now, there is no racing in all of Northern California. So this is great progress. Great news for us horse advocates and animal activists.
That's such good news to hear. What about, let's take it a little broader. What's going on overall in the country, and I'd say even in the world? Can you give us a little?
Sure. So I really can't speak to the world because we definitely focus on America. But I can tell you that since the year 2000, and there is a page on our website, Shuttered Tracks, it's right on our homepage. You can find it. 50 tracks have closed around the country just since the year 2000, and only a handful have opened in that same time period, and they only opened and can only open with taxpayer subsidization, which is a huge part of this issue, which we can certainly get into. In fact, California, it would be easier to name the states that don't subsidize horse racing rather than the ones who do. It's roughly 75% of the total industry is being propped up by taxpayer money. California is one of those rare states that does not, and that has been one of their battle cries. The horse racing people out there is that we need what Virginia just recently enacted and Kentucky just recently enacted. They're called historical horse racing machines, but they're a slot machine by another name. So this would just be another opportunity for the racing industry to receive subsidies. There's no positive prospects at present for the horse racing people to get that in California, but it is something that we all have to keep on our radar because going forward, it's the only way they're going to succeed even in Southern California, even with those prominent tracks in Del Mar and Santa Anita. They're not meeting revenue expectations because horse racing, as we've spoken about for the past 10 years, is in massive decline and has been for decades.
And there is one more big news in Massachusetts here, and I don't know if Patrick wants to take.
Go right ahead.
There's about, I think I tried to grab, but I think it was 10 cities or towns in Massachusetts where new horse racing was proposed. And the 10th one, and this is the 7th in the past so many years, has been shot down. And this time, the great people in the town of Leominster got a ban, the first municipal ban that we believe of horse racing and dog racing in that town, and they shut down the new track proposal. So the people in Massachusetts are really fighting every time the industry wants to open a track. There's no thoroughbred racing in Massachusetts. There is a harness track in Massachusetts, and there's a subsidy to be had. The subsidy is a little bit different there. It's a sport betting license, but they are relentless in opening a track. They're spending millions of dollars, but they're getting shot down town after town after town. Some of these votes are just pressure to the city council, and some have been pushed to referendum. And people have come out in droves and just really been fighting and voting against this. So that's a huge, huge win.
Right.
Again, in Massachusetts, we've helped stop new tracks in other states as well. In Michigan.
And just to kind of add to what Nicole just said, so it's really important to understand that the thoroughbred racing people in Massachusetts are not trying to get racing because that is in and of itself a profitable business. They know it's not, but it is tied, unfortunately, by law at the state level. The only way you can receive bets on sports betting, which was real sports on played by autonomous human beings, basketball, baseball, football, the only way you can have that license to take those bets is if you have a horse racing or a casino license. And in this case, it would be a lot easier for them to just open up a racetrack, run a handful of dates a year, but they'll be making money on the lucrative sports betting business. So the law needs to be changed at the state level in Boston. Until it is, this will continue to happen. They are, as Nicole mentioned, they've tried 10 times now and they've failed 10 times because the people in Massachusetts are engaged and fight back on this. And of course, we help in each of these towns. And right now, there is no thoroughbred racing in all of New England, all 6 states.
Wow.
So we've made great progress and great strides, but the subsidy issue is one that we need to meet head on, and we are fighting it head on.
I wanted to jump in with this historical HHR program. I've heard people say, well, it's historical horse racing, meaning people are betting on races that have already taken place. What if there were a library where horses were no longer run?
Right.
And so that's one of the stories. Can you address that?
Yeah. So as far as the HHR machines, that's not what they're intended for. It's a subsidy for the racing industry. They do not want those machines to replace the live racing. Now, if you're asking me philosophically, would we have an issue if they were to replace live horse racing? Of course not. If we could get rid of animal exploitation in this arena entirely with these machines, of course that would be fine with us. But that's not what the intention is here. As I mentioned, these were recently put in place in Virginia and in Kentucky, and they're laughing all the way to the bank. So they put these machines on site, and a portion of the tax that's supposed to go back to the state for things like education and infrastructure is instead being used to prop up the racing operation. So that's something we need to fight, and we are fighting across the country. Whenever these things come up, we can certainly get into what we're doing in other states, but in California is something, like I said, we need to definitely keep on our radar because they're going to be going for this. They're going to be asking for these machines or some form of subsidy because they will not survive without it. It's clear. There are just a handful of tracks, maybe 5 at the most, in the entire country that are truly profitable and self-sufficient. And I would include Del Mar and Santa Anita in that 5 now, but going forward, I do not believe that will be the case. I think that its popularity of horse racing has been declining, as I said, for decades, and will continue to go that route. They're profitable now, but 10 years from now it would be a different discussion, and that's why they're going to be looking for these subsidies.
Okay, great. I want to let Nicole talk about the international scene.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out that there are groups that do what we do. We have international partners all over the world. Animal Aid is in the UK. They've been doing this before horse racing wrongs, and also the Coalition for the Protection of Racehorses in Australia. But recently, we helped a new group in India start up. They reached out to us last fall, and they really liked our model, and we guided them through. And now we have another international partner called Race Horse Racing India. So horse racing is really being fought on a global scale now, and I think it's really important, and there was another person that reached out from Norway, and she's collecting the same sort of data we are. So I think that's really important to show that this is really, a global fight too. It's huge in the United States. It's bigger, I think, in the United States than most other countries. There's more tracks here. But I think it's great that, more and more countries are picking up on this, and great activists out there fighting the fight.
Mm-hmm. Maybe it's a good time to talk about some of the important legislation.
I can talk about what's happening in Pennsylvania and New York. We are fighting the subsidies in both of those states. We've started a coalition with this great animal rights group called Revolution Philadelphia, and
they're great.
we've had multiple meetings with legislators in Pennsylvania, all setting the groundwork for legislation that we hope to introduce in the fall, which would again be designed to reverse those subsidies. Currently, the Pennsylvania horse racing industry is receiving $200 million per year. They have received over $3 billion since 2004, and that all 6 of those tracks in Pennsylvania, all 6 of them would have closed years ago without this massive taxpayer corporate welfare. So we are, again, we're engaged. We're engaged in New York, our home state. There's legislation that was introduced a couple of years back that is still active. So we're fighting the subsidy issue, and we really feel confident that if we can get a win in one of these states, that others will follow. So it's an uphill battle because the industry engages high level lobby firms to fight back, and they always claim that jobs are at stake. And if you don't give us this subsidy, you're going to be responsible for putting so many thousands of people out of work. They pluck those numbers out of thin air. But we have arguments for the jobs issue, starting with the fact that all of these tracks sit on very valuable real estate. In fact, the track at Santa Anita, the property's been valued at over $1 billion. So those properties can and will be redeveloped, and all kinds of new jobs will follow. And we always use, ironically, Hollywood Park in Southern California as our Exhibit A when we're talking about the redevelopment of these track properties. So Hollywood Park in Southern California closed in 2013. It is now the site of a full-service casino. It has office, retail space. It is also the site of an NFL stadium. There's all kinds of jobs that were created in the wake of that track closing, better jobs, in fact, and more tax revenue, more economic activity. So we have an argument to push back on that. So it's not that we're insensitive to people potentially losing their jobs, but we always say that ultimately this is a moral issue, right? If you believe it is wrong for us to be abusing and killing these beautiful, intelligent, sensitive creatures for lousy $2 bets, then I'm sorry, jobs and money have no place in the conversation.
Right, and you just talked about partnering with Rev Philly, the organization of Philly. And in fact, what I found out interviewing them was the electric carriage horses, eliminating carriage horses, actually for the people working was much more profitable.
Absolutely.
Yep. So it's just getting people used to moving forward. And it sounds like you're doing that. We want to talk about some of the things you're doing. Like, for example, there's that Wave 3 trauma clip. I think we're going to play that clip. I have it.
It was a very catastrophic break in one of his front legs where it was just swinging.
And suddenly, cheers from Sensori's family turned to tears.
And I was too. I was sitting there crying because I love these animals so much. I have my own horse. It's traumatic seeing it happen in person.
That trauma was repeated 7 times for horses racing in Churchill Downs Spring Meet.
So, yes, can we talk a little bit about this situation? You mentioned how people are, not wanting, they're against horse racing, particularly younger people don't seem to be coming out to the tracks. It's a dying business. And when people that were into it even now are becoming horrified when they see things like this happening. So can you address that?
Yeah, actually, Kayla, the person who was interviewed for that piece, reached out to us first, and she described her experience at the track. It was her first time going to Churchill Downs. I was asked about the deaths at Churchill Downs. Ironically, and this is a very good point, the journalist, David Mattingly, had interviewed me back around the Kentucky Derby. And the focus then, of course, this is a Louisville-based station, so there's always going to be a bias toward Churchill Downs, toward the Derby, toward horse racing. He said, what are your feelings about the death numbers going down last year, 2024, relative to 2023, when the deaths at Churchill were making national news? And I said, I think you're looking at it all wrong. These deaths will fluctuate from meet to meet, from track to track, from state to state. In fact, Saratoga Racecourse had a perfect up-down death toll for, I think, 7 or 8 years, an up-down pattern for 7 or 8 years. But the important point here is that the killing in the aggregate for the whole industry, and that's the way we need to look at this, is unfailingly constant. And so, even though I said those things back in the spring when he interviewed me, the piece was all about how Churchill Downs had become safer from 23 to 24, which is outrageous. We're talking about 1 year. And after the Kentucky Derby, there were a string of kills at Churchill Downs, 7 or 8 of them. And he reached back out to me. Almost, I felt validated. Like, yeah, this is what I told you was going to happen. These things will vary from year to year, meet to meet. And here we are with another piece on the killing at Churchill Downs in 2025. So the point is, the deaths continue and will continue. It's built into the system, and we can certainly get into that, Lindsay.
Yeah, that would be great. Let's go ahead and have you talk about that next. How system.
So if you were to just read, general media accounts about deaths in horse racing, if you weren't really diving deep into it, if you weren't looking at our website, you would think that racing is getting safer, because that's the narrative that the industry puts out. The Jockey Club, HISA, which is that agency that was created by an act of Congress in 2020 in the wake of all those deaths at Santa Anita. Remember, it was all desperate times back then, so they had to do something to assuage uneasiness in the public. So they created this authority called HISA. So HISA now is supposedly standardizing all drug rules and penalties and racetrack safety, track safety accreditation, those kinds of things. It's a lot of propaganda. And they're putting out these numbers saying that the death rate has declined since they took over. It hasn't. So that, I should say, that presupposes that they have credibility. And to my mind, they don't, because all they do is put out a sterile, anonymous death rate, 1.3 deaths per 1,000 starts. They don't give you any identifying information. They don't tell you which horses died, when they died, how they died, where they died. The only way you can get that information, the only place you can get that, is at Horse Racing Wrongs. We do this through FOIA requests to state racing commissions. We've been doing it for 11 years now. We are the definitive record keeper of horse deaths in America. And again, if you just look at what they put out, this death rate, you would think that it's getting safer. Our numbers say it is not. It's the same as it was when we first started in 2014, after you account for the changing metrics. So there was less racing today than there was in 2014, less tracks, less horses in the system. When I factor all that in, our numbers have not changed a bit. So the killing is constant. That's what people need to understand. Ignore the propaganda coming from the other side. Look at our website. Look at the death reports that we publish after we get these FOIA documents. I'm in the process of doing the first half of 2025 now on the website. Just published Indiana yesterday, Ohio today. Look at that. And not just look at the numbers, but look at the details. Read the accounts of how these poor animals died. That's really important for people to understand that this is it's cruel beyond imagination, and the only way you really get a full appreciation for that is by reading the details. This is a running total. This is all 2025. And again, we have just started the process of FOIA reporting. We're up to over 250 kills, or around 250. I think I just updated it this morning. So with the Ohio deaths, we have documented, Lindsey, with names, dates, locations, and details, 11,505 kills at American racetracks since 2014. Imagine that. Over 11,000 kills since 2014. We estimate that some 1,800 horses die at American tracks every year. Five dead horses.
Oh my God.
5 dead horses every single day for $2 bets. And again, the best way, I can talk all day about this, but if you just go to the website, if your viewers go to the website and look at the death reports state by state, especially I would ask them to, if they're going to look at any one particular state, California, Maryland, and Kentucky, give me the most detail, give us the most detail. Mm-hmm. Look at those states, read about the suffering that these poor animals experienced before dying, to get a true appreciation for what's happening at American racetracks.
Just give a quick synopsis, real quick, of actually what they do go through for people that are just picking this up for the first time.
Okay, yeah. So we could talk about the attendant cruelties involved in horse racing. So they're torn from their mothers, families, and herds as mere babies. They are sold usually at the tender age of 1. They are broken, an industry term meaning to be made pliant and submissive, and then they are sold into servitude again at the tender age of 1. They are then thrust into an intensive training regimen at 18 months. So you asked about why the killing is built into the system. Horses do not fully mature till the age of 6. Their bones are not done growing, the growth plates are not done fusing, and the higher up the horse's body are the last to fully finish. So the bones in the spine and neck of all places are the last to fully form. Again, we're talking about 18-month-old babies in an intensive training regimen. And why do I say, how can I back that up? Well, when we get these full necropsy reports from California, Maryland, Kentucky, we see time and again 4, 3, even 2-year-old horses. These are adolescents dying with chronic conditions like osteoarthritis and degenerative joint disease, sometimes in all 4 limbs. That speaks to that unremitting grinding of those bodies. And perhaps the worst of it, I think it's the worst of it for Nicole and I, is the unremitting confinement and isolation. So racehorses are, as a rule, kept locked in tiny 12 by 12 stalls alone for over 23 hours a day. These are naturally social herd animals locked up in solitary confinement for over 23 hours a day. They exhibit the same stereotypies that we used to see with the ringland elephants, the bobbing, the swaying, the weaving. For horses, they do what's called cribbing or windsucking. They'll grab onto something in their stall and suck in air. They'll kick, they'll dig, they'll even self-mutilate. And these are clear, unequivocal signs that they are suffering emotional and mental anguish. Right? The stereotypies are unnatural behaviors because all their natural instincts and desires are being thwarted. And don't just take my word for it. I'm an animal rights activist, so people could say, well, what do you know? We always get expert testimony. So Dr. Craig Kulikowski is a prominent equine veterinarian here in upstate New York, has testified before the New York State Senate. He said that keeping a horse locked up like that is akin to keeping a 100-pound child locked in a 4x4 closet for 23 hours a day. Dr. Nicholas Dodman, a world-renowned animal behaviorist and a member of our advisory board, has likened it to keeping human beings in solitary confinement. He says the best way to understand what these animals are experiencing is to read accounts of humans that have been kept in solitary and what they experienced. So that's what these beautiful animals are living every single day at the racetrack. And again, for us, that's the worst of it because, keeping any animal locked up, whether it's a cage, a pen, a stall, in the case of horses, that's the worst thing we do to them is take away their autonomy to enslave them. And that's what's happening to horses at the racetrack. They are led around by nose chains and lip chains. They have their tongues tied down because it's supposed to maximize their performance during a race. They have blinders put on if they're particularly anxious or fractious is the word that they use, because they're scared. So they put these blinders on them and remember, the eyes of a horse are one of the great tools that they have as a prey animal, right? And so they're shutting that off by putting these blinders on these horses. Another example of how they're terrified. And here's something that a lot of people don't know. So they stick a chunk of metal in their mouths. They're called bits. And it's tied to the reins, and it's used for control, right? Everyone knows, a lot of people know about bits. And it's intuitive that causes pain in and of itself by being shoved into the soft palate of the mouth. But something I didn't know until a couple of years ago. So the bit also prevents the horse from creating a tight lip seal. So in nature, and again, this is all documented on our website. We had a specialist in equine ear, nose, and throat write a statement on our website about what the bit does to a horse. So in nature, they are obligate nose breathers. And so when they're running, they create a tight lip seal. The bit prevents that tight lip seal. So Dr. Robert Cook, he's from Tufts University, he wrote this statement. He said that a horse who is racing at a breakneck speed, remember, is going to feel, and he used these words, these aren't my words, he is going to feel like he is suffocating, asphyxiating, and he likened it to waterboarding.
Oh my God.
Something that most people have no idea about, what the bit does to these beautiful animals. So the larger point is here, it's much more than just about death at the track. But when we talk about death, I think most people think that most horses die of a broken leg, and it's a quick shot of the pink solution, as it's called, and the euthanasia is quick and painless, and nothing could be further from the truth. So yes, of course, horses die of shattered legs. Often their bones are sticking out. There's blood. They're in terrible pain, and the racing industry, of course, has a vested interest in having that euthanasia take place off the track, out of sight, out of mind, right? So if at all possible, they load that catastrophically injured horse onto the back of a van, put him back in the barn where they euthanize. But sometimes that's impossible. So they can't get the horse onto the ambulance, as it's called. And so they'll euthanize right there. And that's what happened to that witness at Churchill Downs, Kayla. She saw the van or the vet come out. They put the tarp up, and they have to euthanize on the spot. So those are the broken legs, which a lot of people know about. But the horses also die of what's called exercise-associated pulmonary hemorrhage. They bleed out from their lungs. They also die of what's called cardiovascular collapse. Their hearts just give out. These are adolescents, remember. They also die of broken necks, severed spines, ruptured ligaments, blunt force head trauma from either flipping in the starting gate, these metal contraptions, because they're terrified. So they'll flip, they'll rear backward, and they'll suffer blunt force head trauma, fracture their skulls. This is all coming from state racing commissions, all coming from the necropsy reports. It's all documented. It's irrefutable evidence of the cruelty of the horse racing industry. And of course, whips. Let's talk about that. If you saw someone whipping his dog in the park this afternoon, you would call 911, and that person would be arrested on the spot for animal cruelty. In many states, felony animal cruelty. I'm sure it is in California. But at the racetrack, it's all just part of the game. And let's make no mistake about it, whipping hurts, obviously, right? Dr. Rick Arthur, who was the then medical director for the California Horse Racing Board, spoke at a conference in 2019. And very important to note, Dr. Arthur is not against horse racing. He said at this conference, so other people from the industry, let's not pretend. Of course whipping hurts. That's why we do it. Run faster or I will beat you. We've got a video clip of him saying that on the website. So, of course, that's obvious, but if you listen to the industry propaganda, they'll say, "Oh, it's called a crop, a riding crop." Number one, they don't call it a whip, and it's a harmless guide. And the horse's skin is so thick that they don't even feel it.
Right.
That's nonsense. We all know that. Of course, it hurts. Like Dr. Arthur says, that's why they do it. They whip the horse to motivate. So anyone who calls this a sport, I'll start with that. I mean, we can go down the line of why it's not a sport, but in what other sport are the athletes beaten for motivation? I mean, it's
Right.
it's stupidity. But this is what we're fighting against.
We deploy these around the country at major tracks. Every Triple Crown race. They've been at Santa Anita. They've been in New Jersey. They've been at Del Mar, Saratoga, Churchill Downs, Pimlico Racecourse. We have these truck drivers just circle the track for an 8-hour day to show people going in the reality and the truth about horse racing. We have videos of people and photos of people watching these. On Travers Day in 2023, I believe, 2 horses died that day. And I instructed the driver to just go right where people were exiting the track that day to reinforce that this happens every single day. It wasn't just something that happened.
What was the reaction that you got there when you talked to people and had it showed?
That one particular day, 2 horses had died, and there was a lot of accounts of the people who were there. So we really made sure that truck was right out there as people were exiting the track, so they knew. The driver of the truck, we weren't there at that moment because we had been done for the day. It was later in the day, but the driver of the truck I was in communication with him, and he had said that people were stopping, they were watching. A lot of people were upset that he was there because they had just seen 2 horses die at Saratoga Racecourse that day, that late afternoon.
They didn't want to see what was really going on.
There was a mixed reaction that day. I think a lot of people didn't want him there. The industry certainly didn't want him there. But it just reinforces everything that we say.
And that's our message.
Go ahead.
Our message. That's our message, Lindsey, right? When we're out protesting at Saratoga, is it can't happen without your support. It can't happen without you going through the turnstile and placing bets, watching it on TV. It's economics 101, right? Supply and demand. And as long as people are supporting this industry, horses will continue to suffer and die. And that's our message. And we are making progress, but it doesn't come fast enough. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the dog racing analogy, right? So it should be obvious to anyone that's looking at this reasonably and rationally that in regard to how the relative animals are treated, there is not a whit of difference between dog racing and horse racing. Yet, dog racing in this country is all but dead. There are just 2 tracks left in the entire nation, both in West Virginia, and even more telling, 44 states have outlawed dog racing on moral grounds. 44, including California. And yet horse racing gets this pass under the banner of sport, the sport of kings. So that's what we are fighting. That's what we have been fighting from the outset, is this mindset that horse racing is a sport. Horse racing was on the cover of Sports Illustrated 46 times in that publication's first 30 years. ESPN named Secretariat the 35th greatest athlete of the 20th century. Before, I think, other jockeys and horses on that list also, the top 100. So that's what we are fighting, is this mindset. We've been conditioned from birth to think of horse racing as a sport. We call these animals equine athletes. It's a load of rubbish, of course.
Many of these racehorses wind up in the slaughter pipeline. And
Right.
you want to talk to people. You gave a great description of the torture and torment and horror they go through being horse races, but there's even another layer, if you can imagine.
There was an expose back in 2008 on HBO's Real Sports about slaughter. Back then, because no one cared, no one was watching, the meat man, as he was called, would back his truck up on a Friday afternoon at the track, and you could just unload your spent or losers onto the track or onto that truck, and off he would go to the slaughterhouse. After that expose, they put out these strict supposedly strict no slaughter policies, saying that if you're caught selling your horse to slaughter, or if your horse ends up at slaughter with your knowledge, then you will lose your license. Well, to my knowledge, no one in the United States has lost his or her license because of these policies. And of course not, because they go through middlemen now. So the key word, of course, was knowingly sell your horse to slaughter. So the question is, how many horses? We do not know the exact number of discarded American racehorses ending up in Canada and Mexico. Remember, currently we do not have equine slaughter on American soil. It hasn't been banned, it's just been defunded. So we have to ship them, which is itself a horror, to Canada and Mexico. So they can go up to 28 hours by USDA regulations, up to 28 hours on these crammed trailers without food, water, or rest. So I'll back up a second. How many horses? The consensus among the rescue community, the people who are doing this day in and day out, is we're talking multiple thousands every year. Multiple thousands of these erstwhile athletes being sent to equine hell at the end of their so-called careers. In fact, in 2019, Alex Waldrop, who was the then head of the National Thoroughbred Racing Association, told USA Today that 7,500 American thoroughbreds are going to slaughter every year. Think about that. One of the most important executives in all of U.S. racing freely admitting that each year, 7,500 of his industry's supposedly beloved family members are ending up being at the slaughterhouse. So what does that entail? Once they get to these cold concrete abattoirs in Canada or Mexico, they are shot either with a rifle or a retractable metal bolt to the brain. But often this takes multiple tries because these horses are panicked. Remember, they're head shy, flight inclined animals. And then that's exacerbated by floors made slippery with blood. So this may take multiple tries to render the horse unconscious, which is supposed to happen, but it doesn't always happen. And they are bled out, yes, occasionally while still conscious, and finally butchered for their meat. The whimsical names and cheering crowds a bitter lifetime ago. We have this great quote from a Canadian horse slaughter activist, Twyla Francois, and she talks about how these animals, even after all that they've gone through on this journey to these abattoirs, are still seeking out a friendly face among the men who are going to kill them. Imagine that. These beloved family members, as the industry likes to call them, these majestic equine athletes, are being snuffed out in the most horrific of ways. So that's a very much still a part of the horse racing story. Don't let their lies deceive you. There's not enough money, not nearly enough money, for them to cover all the horses who are bred every year. We figured it out that in order to guarantee a safe landing for every member of this year's foal crop, which is that disgusting term they use for the number of new horses coming into the system every year, the foal crop, very telling. The industry would need to come up with some $2 billion. If you just use basic averages, like a 5-year career, a 25-year lifespan, and an average annual cost of $5,000, which is nothing. It's usually more than that. But they would still have to come up with $2 billion just for this year's group of horses coming into the system. The same would be needed next year and the year after that, et cetera, et cetera. There's neither the will nor the ability for the racing industry to care for all the horses that they are producing every year. So that's why we have slaughter. It's an outlet for these racing trainers and owners.
Incredible.
And another thing, we have protests across the country, at tracks across the country, in many, many states. You can find that information also on our Facebook page. Click on events, and you can join a protest. On our website as well, I believe it's under Join Us, Protests and Events. You'll find both events that we're at, Veg Fest or Patrick speaking events, but you'll also find protests you can join. And if you want to organize a protest in your community, we will help. You can email me at Nicole@horseracingbronx.com, and I can help you organize a protest, give you the information. We'll furnish materials, banners, leaflets, give you all the guidance you need to stand up for the horses in your area.
And contact Nicole and get involved in our action group. Write to your legislators. Contact the media. Write a letter to the editor. Submit an op-ed. we can help with that. We've helped countless people do that. You have to speak. You have to speak up, no matter what the wrong is in this world, right? I always say that every great social justice movement in our nation's history, whether it's civil rights, women's rights, sexual orientation rights, whatever the issue, it always starts in the streets. We have to voice our outrage. We have to let the general population know that there's something wrong here.
Thank you for being here today. And please, everyone, contact horseracingwrongs.org. And also, there is a donation page.
And also on our website, you can go to the tab Join Us, and then you can click on Sign the Pledge to Boycott Horse Racing. And you can do two things there. You can sign the pledge and add your name to the pledge, and then you can opt into our email. And again, that zip code will let us know when we target an email to whatever state. You can reach out to your state reps.
Well, I want to thank you both for what you do. It's just incredible, and you really are making such a difference. You and all the others across the country that are working with you. Thank you for being on today.